right. Thank you, everybody, as you hang in there with what is probably the first of several technical difficulties we will have this evening. But we're really glad that you're taking the time out of your lovely evening to join us to talk about the Southern Chester County Circuit Trail Feasibility Study that the Chester County Planning Commission has been working on the past couple months. And partial funding for this project comes from the Regional Trails Program, which is administered by the Delaware Valley Regional Planning Commission with funding from the William Penn Foundation. So we thank our project funder for the opportunity to do this work. And tonight we are lucky enough to have all of our Chester County commissioners with us. And they're all great proponents of trails and understand the many benefits that trails have to communities. And I'm pleased to introduce them, your commissioners, Marian Moskowitz, Josh Maxwell, and Michelle Kickline. Commissioners, would you like to say a few words?
Hi, thank you. It's great to be with you. This is an exciting project. You know, Chester County has been a strong supporter of the circuit, which is part of the Regional Trail Network in the greater Philadelphia area. We were the first county in the Philadelphia region to sign a resolution to support the circuit trails in 2017. Is Hector going to translate or?
Sure. El condado de Chester fuertemente apoya el circuito, la red regional de senderos en el área rodeante de Filadelfia. El condado de Chester fue el primer condado en la región de Filadelfia en firmar una resolución en apoyo al circuito de senderos en el 2017.
The county's existing circuit trails are well loved and well used. These include the Struble Trail in the Downingtown area, the Schuylkill River Trail in the northern part of the county, and the Chester Valley Trail, which goes from King of Prussia to Exton.
El circuito de senderos del condado es muy amado y bien usado. El sendero Struble en el área de Downingtown, el sendero del río Schuylkill y en la parte noreste del condado, y el sendero del valle de Chester que va desde King of Prussia hasta Exton.
COVID-19 pandemic has shown us just how valuable our trail system is. In comparison to April of 2019, trail use was up by 83% on the Schuylkill River Trail this year, and it was up 65% on the Chester Valley Trail.
La pandemia del COVID-19 nos ha mostrado cuál valioso es el sistema de senderos. En comparación a abril del 2019, el uso de senderos en abril ha aumentado un 83% en el sendero del río Schuylkill y 65% en el sendero del valle de Chester.
Unfortunately, there are no circuit trails in southern Chester County yet, and this project is looking at the options to place a circuit trail on the map in this part of the county.
Desafortunadamente, no hay circuitos de senderos en la parte sureste del condado de Chester, y este proyecto está estudiando la factibilidad de poner un circuito de senderos en el mapa.
We believe that high-quality regional trails offer economic development benefits to small towns like those in the study, including Kennett Square, Avondale, West Grove, and Oxford.
Creemos que los senderos bien mantenidos de alta calidad ofrecen desarrollo económico a pueblos pequeños como los de este estudio, incluyendo Kennett Square, Avondale, West Grove y Oxford.
Cyclists are looking for local places to stop and have lunch, buy some new gear, or to stay overnight. Regional trails can attract or spawn new businesses that cater to trail users, creating hubs of recreation-based tourism.
Los ciclistas están buscando lugares locales, auténticos para parar y almorzar, comprar equipamiento nuevo o quedarse a pasar la noche. Los senderos regionales pueden atraer o crear nuevos negocios que atiendan a los usuarios del sendero, creando centros de recreación en base al turismo.
Chester County is also committed to increasing mobility options for people and to reduce congestion on our roadways.
El condado de Chester está comprometido en incrementar las opciones de movilidad para personas y reducir el tráfico en nuestras carreteras.
Trails offer a fun and healthy alternative to driving. In the places that you go to, like school, work, and the grocery store.
Los senderos ofrecen una alternativa divertida y saludable a conducir un vehículo a los lugares a los que usted va más a menudo, como la escuela, trabajo y tienda.
For those without regular access to a car, trails can provide a safe way to get around without having to rely on public transportation or friends for a ride.
Para aquellos sin acceso regular a carros, los senderos pueden proporcionar una manera segura de transportarse sin tener que depender del transporte público o amigos para obtener un aventón.
The Chester Valley Trail is a great example of a commuter trail. It connects a lot of office parks, most notably the Vanguard campus in Malvern, and it's regularly used by commuters.
El sendero del Valle de Chester es un gran ejemplo de senderos para transporte. Conecta muchos centros de oficina, más notablemente el campus de Vanguard en Malvern, y es regularmente usado por gente de fuera.
A trail in southern Chester County could provide the same benefits for the employees and employers in this region. So thank you so much for your virtual attendance this evening to discuss this potential and exciting southern Chester County Circuit Trail.
Un sendero en el sureste del condado de Chester County puede proporcionar los mismos beneficios a los empleados y empleadores de esta región. Muchísimas gracias por su asistencia a esta reunión virtual para discutir estos temas.
And thank you to our commissioners for being with us tonight and working through these technical difficulties with us. But I think we're on the upswing now. I'd also like to acknowledge that many Planning Commission staff are here with us this evening, including our Executive Director, Brian O'Leary. And I want to let everyone know that this meeting is being recorded, including the chat. And as you probably noticed, everyone is muted and you are not able to unmute yourself. And we did that just so that it doesn't get too chaotic with background noise. And if you're having any technical issues, please send a chat to Beth Cunliffe. Find her name in the chat window. But I recognize that this is probably the first public meeting online that many of you have been to. So we'd like to show you how to use some of the functionality of Zoom really quick, just so everyone is able to fully participate. If you have any questions, there are two ways to ask your question. You can either type it into the chat at any time during the meeting, or you can use the raise your hand function during the Q&A, which will be at the end. And I will show you how to do all of those things. And later on after the presentation, we're going to be having a breakout group discussions. And if you would like to be in a Spanish speaking breakout room, please send a private chat to the host, which shows up as Chester County Planning Commission in the taskbar, in the chat bar. So this is how you mute yourself. It's important to know this for the breakout session, when it'll be important for you to be able to mute and unmute yourself so you can speak. There should be a mute button in the bottom left-hand side of your screen. Right now, this would be my PowerPoint slides, but it would be in the bottom right. And then to raise your hand, that's found in the participants button. So if you click the participants button, you see a list of everybody who's here. And at the bottom of that bar is a raise your hand button. And so you would just click that, and then the host will see that you have raised your hand. And during the question and answer period, she will call on you and unmute you. And that's when you know it's your chance to ask your question. And to put something in the chat, there's a chat button, and when the chat window opens up, you can choose who to send it to. And you can choose to send it to everyone, just to say hi or tell us what you think about the project. Or you can also choose to send it to the host, which is Chester County Planning Commission, or you could send it to Beth Cunliffe if you have a technical question about Zoom, or you could send it to me. So also remember, this is where you would ask to be placed in the Spanish language discussion group. So here's what we're doing tonight. We're going to start with the presentation about the project, just so everyone has some background information about what we're trying to do. And we're going to talk about the project background, our public survey that is still open, but we'd like to share with you what we've found so far, and talk about some preliminary trail alignments. That is the main purpose of this meeting, is we'd like to get your feedback on these preliminary trail alignments. And we'll share some information about how the small group discussions are going to work. And then we will break out into small groups, which I will talk to you more about at the end of the meeting. So I'd like to start with a poll, if I can. You know, we do a lot of work to get the word out about our meetings, and it's always good to know how folks are hearing about them. So if you can, hopefully you can see the poll. How did you hear about this meeting? Was it through the article in the Daily Local News, a Facebook post, either from Chester County Planning Commission or another organization? Did you get an email invitation? Did you see a flyer? Did you hear from a friend, or some other way? And if there's another way, feel free to put that into the chat, how you heard about the meeting. So it looks like about 50 people have responded so far. So we'll just wait another minute to hear how people heard about the meeting. Okay, we've got most people, so I'm going to end the poll and share the results with you. So it sounds like most people got an email. So that's good. We did have a place on our website where you could sign up for more information about the project and to receive project updates. So, and we did have a fair number of people sign up for that. So thanks everybody for letting us know. Next, I wanted to talk to you about the Circuit Trail Network. So this is, you know, this project is the Southern Chester County Circuit Trail Feasibility Study. So what is a circuit trail? This is a map of the circuit, which is the trail network of the greater Philadelphia area. And there's lots of different colors on this map. So the blue trails are planned. They don't exist yet. The green trails are existing. And the pink trails are in progress or under construction. So when this network is finished, it will be over 800 miles of trails, of interconnected trails, and that's the most important part. So you can note on this map that in Southern Chester County, you know, there are no circuit trails. So this project intends to add one of these blue lines to the circuit map as a planned trail in Southern Chester County. And this project, the idea came from the public input that we received when we were updating the county's comprehensive plan, Landscapes 3, a few years ago. There was a lot of interest that we heard in trails in Southern Chester County. And there used to be a proposed circuit trail on that circuit map in Southern Chester County that followed the active freight rail corridor that goes from Chadds Ford through Oxford. And trail advocates have been interested in making that corridor a trail for decades. But because the rail line is active and for a number of other reasons, it's been deemed not possible to have both a trail and the active rail within that corridor. So this project is really looking for an alternative route to that rail corridor. And it's also important to note that although the Chester County Planning Commission is doing this study, that it's likely that whatever trail alignment is recommended would become a municipal project, and that the municipalities would be responsible for for developing the trail, just because you know, the county has lots of other trails on its plate to develop, and we want these things to happen sooner rather than later. And so we just feel that it would be expedited the most if it were a locally driven project. And something else that we're looking at, in addition to connecting to the circuit, is having this trail be a potential scenic route for the East Coast Greenway. And this green line is the current route of the East Coast Greenway. And if you're not familiar with this trail, it's both planned and existing, but when it's complete, it will be a continuous trail between Maine and Florida. So it's quite the regional trail, and connecting into this network and potentially bringing those East Coast Greenway trail users through Southern Chester County could have major recreation benefits to the communities in this area. But it would also have significant economic benefits. So there's lots of these long regional trails being built, and we're seeing more and more that when these trails come through small towns, they bring new businesses and amenities for the cycling community, which are really amenities for everyone, because they're things like coffee shops and restaurants and bicycle stores and things like that. So we're seeing that these trails can really spur economic development in small Main Street kind of towns. But creating a trail town and really capitalizing on the benefits that trails can have really has to be an intentional and collaborative effort between local governments, local businesses, residents, and other recreation groups. So another of the benefits that the commissioners mentioned is the benefits of the transportation system. And this image is along Baltimore Pike, just east of Kennett Square. And this Walmart is within walking distance from Kennett Square. It's less than a mile away. And plenty of people walk there. But as you see from this image, there's no sidewalk. And so, you know, walkers and cyclists shouldn't have to walk in the roadway or in that grass that doesn't look like it's been mowed in a while. To get to the places that they want to go. So we're also looking at this project as a way to connect people to the places that they want to go safely. And so everyone may have a different image of what a trail looks like in their mind. So we wanted to take a minute to get on the same page with everybody about what we are planning for in this study. And we are really looking for where a multi-use trail might be possible. And a multi-use trail is a bike trail and a pedestrian trail. So it's accessible to people with disabilities. It's relatively flat, it's paved, it's at least 10 feet wide. And so you can imagine that if you're planning in an area that's already pretty developed, like in West Grove or Avondale, it can be challenging to find enough space for a trail like this to fit. So because of that, and because our study area is so large between Oxford and Chadds Ford, roughly 20 miles, we're also looking at other potential facility types that would be used for short distances as connector routes to connect these longer stretches of multi-use trails. And one of those types is a restricted use trail, which could look like this. It could look like a hiking trail, but it also could just be a paved path that's 6 feet wide rather than 10 feet wide, or it could be a paved path that's relatively steep. So that's another type of facility we're looking at. And we're also looking at the possibility of expanding bike lanes. So bike lanes are generally 5 feet wide and they're within the roadway. And in some places a sidewalk would be possible, and in some places it might not. So we're looking at both those options. And then the least preferable option, but still better than nothing, if you were connecting to more inclusive facilities, is a share the road situation where the cyclists would be in the roadway with the cars, but there would be signage added. There might be painted markings on the road itself, indicating that for motorists to be aware of cyclists. So we are also looking at this on lower volume roadways. And so for this study, it's important to know whether people would be willing to use those on-road facilities like those that we just showed. And that you can imagine that depending on your level of comfort riding a bicycle, you may or may not use some of those facilities. So we would like to hear from you if you are a bicyclist, or if you were a bicyclist. What type of user would you be? Would you be strong and fearless? And so that type of facility or that type of user might be comfortable with no bike lanes on a busy street. Are you enthused and confident, which could mean that you're comfortable riding on a wider shoulder on a busy street or in a narrow bike lane? And interested but concerned, which is what many people often fall into. You might be comfortable riding on a calm street, or are you no way, no how? Like if you're riding with a small child, or you're just completely not comfortable riding on the road. It's always interesting to see how people rate themselves. So we have most people reporting. All right, so just another minute and I'm going to end the poll. All right, let's see where we ended up. So looks like most people are interested but concerned. And we have it looks like our group trends towards the stronger side of cyclists. So that's interesting. Thanks for taking our poll and sharing your skill level with us. So moving on. Now I'd like to share with you the results so far of our public survey that I mentioned. So we've gotten over 1,000 responses so far, and this map just shows roughly where most of the results were from. So you can see that we got responses from all over the place, but they were concentrated in our study area, which is a good thing. But it also shows that people outside of our study area are really interested in this project too. So just some of the highlights that I think are important to note. We asked how often people walk or bicycle for transportation purposes. And as you might expect, the majority of people said rarely or never. And this is important because, like we said, we're thinking of this as a potential transportation route as well. And so the people who do walk or bicycle for transportation, the vast majority of them felt like the facilities that exist are not adequate. And then for those that do not currently walk or bicycle for transportation, almost 80% people said they would be more likely to if there were safe facilities. So I see that, and I see that safety is one of the major barriers to people using active transportation for getting around. Another question we asked was getting at what type of trail people would be most interested in. And so this was on a scale from 1 to 5, with 1 being the most valuable and 5 being the least valuable. And people ranked a scenic trail that connects parks as the most valuable, followed closely behind by a convenient trail that connects housing developments and grocery stores and places of employment. And then following behind that was a regional trail that connects to other trail systems and to other cities. And this was an important question because like we showed you with all those different types of facilities, we want to know if people would use this trail network if it included other facilities besides just a multi-use trail. And 70% of the survey respondents said that they would use a trail system that included bike lanes and sidewalks. And about a quarter of people said that they would only use the multi-use off-road portions. So this is the last poll. I'm interested to hear from you all. Given what you know of your friends and neighbors' activities and opinions, do these results seem accurate to you? And do they seem representative? So I'm going to launch the third and final poll. And if you don't know, not sure is fine. And also feel free to type anything that surprised you or interested you into the chat. And after this question, after you type anything into the chat, I will let you know that we are going to transition the chat to being just, all chats will go to the host, just so it's easier to keep track of questions. All right, we have most people responded. So just another minute. Okay. So it looks like about half the people thought that they were relatively accurate, and then the next one was somewhat accurate. So they're generally on target. The survey is open through the end of July. So if anyone has not taken it yet, we encourage you to do so and share it with your friends. The survey is available on our project website, and I'll share the link to that at the end of the presentation. So now we're going to talk about the trail itself and what we've found. And so, like I said, this is a feasibility study, and there's various aspects of feasibility. And the aspect that we've been paying the most attention to so far has been identifying alignments where it would be physically possible to build a multi-use trail. And so the other two key considerations are whether the public desires a trail in that location, and whether any property owners whose property would be impacted by the trail agree to having a trail in place in that location. And so tonight, we're primarily going to be focusing on the second consideration of whether the public desires the trail. And then based on the opinions that we hear tonight, we will look into more of that legal feasibility of property owners. So basically, there's three types of alignments that we identified that we're going to be looking for your feedback on tonight. The first one is an alignment that follows the Route 1 bypass. And there's sort of three factors that we judged each of the alignments on. One is how well does it connect, or does it serve as a connector to other regional trails and the regional trail system. The second is how well does it serve as a transportation facility? Does it connect people to the places that they want to go? And how valuable would it be as a recreation asset? So is it scenic? Does it pass through parks? That sort of thing. And so the Route 1 alignment, we think, would probably be the best choice if what you're looking for is connecting to other trails in the region, because it's a straight shot. It would be a relatively unbroken multi-use trail if it were feasible. And it could connect to the trail system in Chadds Ford and to potential trails in Maryland. As a transportation facility, it wouldn't be quite as strong because it is outside of all the boroughs, and the boroughs are predominantly where people live in this area, and where they're trying to go in terms of the major employers. So it's not as great there, but it's also not that far outside of the boroughs. And as a recreation facility, it would probably be fairly decent. It would be along a highway, so there would be noise, but it's not terribly unscenic. and it would actually make for a nice trail environment in certain places. So that's the Route 1 alignment, and we're interested to hear what you think about that. Another is a trail along Baltimore Pike. And so this, all these different colors indicate the type of facility that we think would be physically possible along Baltimore Pike. So you can see that the green is multi-use trails, which are what we're shooting for. And a significant portion of Baltimore Pike could probably have multi-use trails, we think, physically. But there would also be a significant amount of bike lanes that may or may not also have sidewalks. And through the boroughs, it would probably be pedestrians would be on the sidewalk and cyclists would be sharing the road. So as a regional connector, it wouldn't be bad. Again, it's a direct route between Oxford and Chadsford, but you might lose some people who are less confident riding on the road when you get to the on-road portions. As a transportation facility, this would probably be the best option because it goes directly through all of the boroughs. It passes by a lot of major employers and a lot of schools. It would connect people to the places they want to go. And as a recreation amenity, it would probably be the least desirable just because, you know, there's significant truck traffic along Baltimore Pike. And in the western part, it can be fairly scenic, but in the eastern part, it's pretty industrial. So it wouldn't be very scenic and it doesn't connect to many parks. And then the third option, which there are actually several options that fit into this category of the scenic route. As a regional connection, it would be okay. It would have a decent draw for people outside of the region because it would go through parks and through southern Chester County farmland, and it would be very scenic as per the name. But as a transportation facility, it would probably be the least desirable because it is not a direct route and it sort of snakes around southern Chester County. But as a recreation facility, it would probably be pretty great because it would connect to parks and it would be scenic, that sort of thing. It would not be a completely unbroken multi-use trail. There are other types of facilities that we think would be necessary. So what are the next steps and how do we plan to proceed with this project? So after we hear from you tonight, this meeting is really important to forming the recommended alignment that we will come up with, if such a thing exists. And so we will analyze the results from the public meeting and the public survey and come up with a draft recommended alignment. And then we'll take that back to the public as well as our project advisory committee and get more input and comments on that draft alignment. And then we'll go back and further refine it. And then we will develop the report, which will talk about how this trail might be implemented. So there may be another public meeting. I anticipate that it's likely. It will likely be another virtual public meeting, depending on what's going on in the world. But we will certainly let everybody here who came tonight know about the next chance for input. And so with that, we will first take questions about everything that was presented so far. And if you have questions about the interactive part that's coming up next, we ask that you hold them because we will explain that afterwards. But again, if you have a question, you can either go to the participants button at the bottom and then click raise your hand and wait to be called on and unmuted, or you can type a question into the chat. Or if you're on Facebook Live, you can type a question into Facebook and we will be monitoring those as well.
So Rachel, it looks like there's a lot of comments and a few questions in the group chat.
Okay, well, thanks for the comments, everybody. We will be saving the chat, so I will go through all of those probably tomorrow.
Do you want me to read off any of the questions for you? Or
Let's do the raised hands first and then do the questions in the chat.
okay, so Michael Gutman, I'm going to unmute him. He has a question. He's raised his hand.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
So I was wondering if there had been any consideration given to connections to public transportation. There might be quite a number of people along its entire path, or to connect to another remote trail system, but who might use the facilities to connect to some public transportation, which could then take them to other areas.
That's a good question. I will say that we have not paid as much attention to that thus far, just because finding a potential alignment is pretty tricky. But certainly that, and we also haven't heard that comment yet, so it's a good thing to consider. And we will incorporate that some of the bus routes into our next round of looking at alignments. So thanks for bringing that up.
And I had one other question, if I may. So you presented the 3 routes, but I assume that they're not necessarily mutually exclusive.
That's correct. So as we'll see in the breakout group portion of this, that you can sort of pick one piece of one route and then connect to another piece of another route and then connect to another piece of another route. So it could be a combination of all 3. That's a really good point.
Well, and also you could have multiple routes in the same area. So you have options depending on your particular circumstances or what kind of environment you want.
It's true. That's very ambitious.
Well, I understand, but
yeah.
you're laying out a future, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which might take 20 years or 30 years to implement in total. But if the routes are all defined and some guidance about how they could be best used and interconnected for different uses and modalities, then that could guide all the local planners who actually have to implement this.
Mm-hmm.
Since it's not the county that's implementing it, but it's all of the communities collectively over time.
Right. We could certainly include the different possibilities that were studied, but in terms of the specific recommendations of the ultimate network, you know, our task is to identify, is there an alignment, and if so, what is it? But I think you're right that we might not need to ignore all the other possibilities that weren't chosen.
Rachel, we have another one that has raised their hand.
Okay.
If that's okay to move on to another question.
Mm-hmm.
Jay, I'm sorry, were you finished there? I didn't mean to cut you off. Jay Eaton.
Hi, Jay.
Unmute him. Sorry, we're trying to unmute him.
He may have to unmute himself.
Yeah.
How about now? Hear me
There we
now?
go. Yep.
We can hear you.
Okay, the 2 of my interests are historic and art, and I would like to know whether or not you're considering, at least particularly for the recreational, whether it's a recreational route or whether it's a hybrid that includes the recreational portion of it, whether or not you might set it up so that there are stops along the way, and those stops might be at some historical resource, or it might be at a place where we could place art, either in the form of a large painting that would survive outdoors or a sculpture.
It's a great point, and I wish there were more art along trails now. It's often an afterthought, but I think that so the scope of this project is really to identify the alignment and what it would take to build the alignment. But saying that, going past historic resources could be part of the decision of where the alignment goes. So that's something we would like to hear about more, that where these resources are. And, you know, we have been considering it a little bit to some extent so far. But like I said, we've mostly been focusing on where would this be possible. And so it might end up being that you decide where the alignment is, and then you figure out where the historic resources are along the route, and then find a way to interpret those and point those out along the way.
I think that would be, at least that's a start in the right direction. I'm thinking if you're doing a trail that is primarily for recreational purposes, that recreational purpose might include stops along the way, either to picnic or do something like that. And
right.
That would be a location for that stop, could be a historic resource. And at some point in time, art could be placed on that same spot.
Agreed. Yeah. And when it's more, when the project is more municipally driven, I think a lot of those things can be more personalized by local historic commissions or art commissions or things like that, with local art, and where trail users, whether they're from the area or people from out of town, can really sort of get the local flavor. So
Right.
it adds a lot to the trail. I agree.
Excuse me, along that same line, you may already know that Karen Marshall has been responsible for a lot of these town tours, and she's doing virtual town tours this year. And at some point in time, when the trail's developed, a town tour along that trail would be just terrific.
That would be fun. Great idea.
Okay, so we have another question here from Grandpa West. I've unmuted you. Go ahead with your question.
The question I have is, as you've done the feasibility studies for the route alignment, how much have you linked with the trail networks that are being developed by the individual communities? For example, Kennett Borough and Kennett Township are working on kind of a circumnavigate around the two areas. I know New Garden Township is doing a lot of stuff with trails. So how much have you linked in with those particular efforts?
That's a great comment and question. So the question was, how much have we linked in with existing and planned trails in the municipalities in this area? And so prior to doing this study, we collected all the trail mapping that had been done so far by the municipalities, and we included that in our analysis. And we're sort of thinking of this project as a great way to add importance to these local trails. So if our route could include some of these local trails that are struggling to be built for one reason or another, it might give more importance to those trails by saying it's part of the Southern Chester County Circuit Trail. And so you will see that some of the alignments do use existing and planned trails that have been identified by the municipalities. Some of them do not. So like along Baltimore Pike, there's not a ton of trail planning that's been going on along Baltimore Pike or along the Route 1 bypass. But a bunch of the scenic routes, as I talked about, do incorporate some of those local trails.
Okay, we have two more here. Rob Eves.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
A question for you. There is a rail line that runs from Chaddsford to Oxford. I'm not sure what the activity of that line is. Have you factored the usage of that the rail line or the right of way into the plans?
Thanks for the question, Rob. So the question was, has the rail line that goes from Oxford to Chaddsford been factored into the planning for this study? The answer is both yes and no. So the purpose of this study is really to identify an alternate route to the rail line, because trail advocates have been excited about the possibility of that rail line being a trail for decades. But based on the rail company's attitude towards anybody being in the rail right of way, and the fact that the rail line is still active and valuable to the industrial uses that are in southern Chester County, we're considering that not a feasible route for a trail. And it's also a very narrow right of way, so there's not space for both a trail and the train.
Okay, we have a question from Joni.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, so thanks for doing this. First of all, this is fantastic. And I know I'm not the only one who's excited about it. In my experience with trails is that a lot of the enthusiasts like myself who are willing to travel to other towns to ride their trails, we want the scenic thing, right? Typically we want the safe trails for our kids, or we want the views. We want to just see the scenery and go out with our kids on the weekends, right? And then I think of the locals who want more of the function. They want to go for the walk or go to the store, go to work. And of course, some occasional rides for pleasure. But I think those are kind of your two polarized views. There's a lot of people in the middle, but the best trails I've been on kind of have both. There's options. I turn right here and I can, see the tunnels and the water views. Or if I turn left, I can just quickly commute to work along a highway. And I just wondered, I guess, if we've considered picking one of those to start, but leaving it open so that the other option could be added in the future phase of some kind. And then my second question is if somebody could talk to what kind of timelines we're looking at here.
Those are both really good questions. So the first question was, could there be an approach where we recommend both a scenic trail and then offshoots that would direct people to the business areas? And then the second question was about the timeline. So in answer to the first question, we've sort of identified so far that no matter what this study recommends, there should really be some bicycle and pedestrian improvements along Baltimore Pike. And we will be looking at what are some feasible options for that and how might that look in different places and who might implement that. So I think that will probably be a recommendation no matter what. And then if that were not the recommended alignment, there certainly could be connector routes that are recommended from the recommended trail to Baltimore Pike, which is, predominantly where you would access the businesses and the other residential centers. So that's my answer for that part. And then the timeline is a tricky question, just because firstly, we don't know what's going to come out of this study yet. And it's really going to depend on public support and the municipalities or whatever entity is formed to push this forward. It may end up being some kind of trail authority or a nonprofit group. There's precedent for both of those options. So we're going to be definitely focusing on implementation in the second part of this study, but to not completely evade your question, these types of trails can take 20 to 30 years to fully develop, but they are generally phased. So something could happen much sooner than that, like within 5 years, if there were if there were a lot of public support for certain pieces of the project.
Any other questions? Raise your hand if you'd like to make a comment or question.
We can move to the chat while people think about it.
Okay.
Questions in the chat.
Do you want to read those? You want me to read them, Rachel, or do you want to go through them?
If you can read them.
Okay. Let's see. I'm going to back up here a little bit and I think Michael discussed the connections to public transportation, right?
Right.
There's really no questions. They're more just comments.
Mhm.
So
Okay.
would you like to make that available after?
Sure. We have one more raised hand.
Okay. Chris H. Can you hear us okay? I don't think he has video.
That's okay.
Chris, are you with us?
Suzanne, can you see the chats that are to the host only that are coming through?
No, are you getting questions, Nancy?
Yes.
Okay. We have two other people. I'm not quite sure what happened there with that last person, but we have Arnold McGuire.
Yes, hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, I was just wondering if you could mention a little bit about the funding that's available now as far as what funding you have for particular phases. So funding for feasibility and, you know, maybe a little bit on where the funding's coming from. Is this just from the landscapes, you know, Chester County, or is there funding coming from outside the area? Thank you.
Sure, that's a good question. So the funding that comes from Chester County, from the Planning Commission, we have funding for feasibility, for planning work for municipalities. And then the Parks and Preservation Department has funding for trail building projects, as well as park projects and things like that. Then a significant amount of funding comes from the state level, I would say, through PennDOT and through the Department of Community and Economic Development, and obviously the Department of Conservation and Natural Resources. And I would say that probably DCNR, Department of Conservation and Natural Resources, is where a lot of the trail development funding comes from. And then there's also the William Penn Foundation, which funds the Regional Trails Program, which funded this study, which provides funding for trails that are designated as part of the Circuit Trail Network. So there would also be that private funding available for this project, because it would be a circuit trail. And there's also federal funding, and that is there's more hoops to jump through, but there's often larger amounts of money available through federal funding, and that's generally for construction. But that would also be an option, and typically reserved for larger projects.
Okay. Peggy Ann Russell has a question as well.
Thank you. I actually sent it in under comment, but I'm going to change it to a question so that you can hear it. Since Walmart portrays themselves from their studies as a vehicular destination shopping area and not a pedestrian destination shopping area, would it be appropriate to ask them to help with some fundraising for this? Because it appears as though, like the one in Kennett, the sidewalk is going to go, you know, right past that shopping center. And I live in the Oxford borough, and across the street is Lower Oxford Township, which has a Walmart, and they, of course, did not put any sidewalks in. We have a lot of people who walk on the road to get up there. So I just thought maybe they might be a source of fundraising for you.
That is a good point. I don't have a ton of experience with working with private landowners to help build the project, but it's certainly done. And it's certainly worth asking, because I agree with you. I will plug a project the Planning Commission is working on right now that sort of attempts to combat that before it becomes an issue, before these developments happen. And we're working to we're inventorying all of the municipalities' ordinances to see if they're requiring Walmart to put a sidewalk in along the existing road when that Walmart is developed. And obviously not just Walmart, it's any development. So the best way to make that not an issue is to require developments to put sidewalks in before they get built. But it doesn't really help us in the case of the Walmart. So, but I agree with you that that it should certainly be explored.
Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, I think Nancy was going to read some questions that went to the host.
Yes. Are you ready for a couple
Yes.
of questions? We have quite a few. From Amy C. She says, how much have equestrian trails been considered given the number of equestrian facilities in southern Chester County?
So this is a hard question to answer because we, firstly, because the county would not be the operator of this trail, we would not be able to decide whether equestrians would be one of the user groups allowed on this trail. We have some trails in the county that do allow horses, and we have some that don't. But as you know, as an equestrian, it sounds like that horses and bicycles don't often mix well. And this is definitely envisioned to be a transportation facility as well as a recreation facility. So if the recommended alignment ends up being the one that connects to a lot of parks and other facilities that do have equestrian use that's existing, then it would definitely be considered more than if the recommended alignment ended up being the one along Baltimore Pike, because I don't think anybody would want to ride their horse along Baltimore Pike.
Okay, and then from Chris H. If each part of the trail is municipally driven, what happens if the municipality doesn't want to manage, construct, or even maintain its portion of the trail?
That's a good question. There are precedents for sort of multi-municipal agreements where they may contract out to an outside company to do the maintenance for the whole trail, or the whole trail may be designed at one time or designed to the same standards so that, you know, it's not a multi-use standard in one township and then you cross the border and it's a horse trail that cyclists were no longer allowed on or something. So we will cover that in our implementation study that will be coming next, but it's definitely a concern.
Okay, and then another question from Emmett H. He says it looks like much of the western portions of the proposed trails will pass through townships without police departments. Will Avondale State Police be responsible for responding to calls in those areas?
That's also a good question, and we haven't gotten that far yet. So we'll talk about public safety when we meet with all the municipalities once the recommended alignment has been chosen, and that will definitely be a discussion about how it would be patrolled and who would be doing that. So to be determined, but definitely something to think about. And thanks for bringing it up.
And Stephen asked, is it common for trails to be built as a result of eminent domain or easements or some other option?
I can really only speak to what's common here, and I think that it's often it's never the case that the entire trail is an easement or acquired through eminent domain, but it is often the case that a small piece of it is acquired that way. And for a trail that would cross so many different properties, unless it were like the PennDOT, the Route 1 alignment that we showed you that would be completely within the Route 1 right-of-way, that would require the agreement with PennDOT, but very few other people. But any of the other alignments would require sort of an all of the above solution. And the parts that that did require easements or eminent domain, and eminent domain is always, easements are always the preferable option. But those parts may not be feasible and may never be built, or there may be an alternate route around the area that's in question. So I hope that answered your question.
Okay, and there are quite a few more questions, and it is now 8:10. Did you want to go into the breakout rooms and answer the rest of the questions?
Yeah, I
later?
think so. We have all of your email addresses, so I'm sorry we didn't get to all the questions, and I'm sorry we got started a little later. But I will respond to each of you individually, because we do have your email addresses, and we know we've saved the chat. So thank you, everybody, for your attention. And now we'd like to move on to what I think will be the fun part of this meeting, where you get to tell us what you think. So what are we looking to learn from you tonight? This meeting is really important. What we hear from you tonight will basically shape what alignment becomes the recommended alignment, or the recommended actions from this project. So we are going to break out into small groups, and we're going to look at an interactive map together. And so everybody's going to be automatically assigned to a small group, and somebody from the Planning Commission will be facilitating the groups, unless you have sent a message to the host, Chester County Planning, asking to be in the Spanish language group. And that group will be facilitated by Brenda Hernandez Torres of the Bicycle Coalition of Greater Philadelphia. So if you have not yet requested the Spanish group and you would like to be in that one, please send a message to the host, Chester County Planning Commission. So weighing those three characteristics that we talked about, the ability to connect to other regional trails, the value as a transportation facility, and the value as a recreation asset, which alignments or parts of the alignments that you'll see would you find the most valuable, or would you use the most? If there are alignments that you think would work as multi-use trails, you can identify those and we can draw those on the map. And also we'd like to see the destinations that you'd like to access and any problem spots that you're aware of with your local knowledge. And so just some ground rules for the breakout sessions. Everyone's an adult, so keep your language clean and your discourse civil, I will say, and make sure you give others a chance to speak if you have a lot of things to say. And while we hope you will stick around to participate in these breakout groups, I wanted to let you know that you can do this interactive mapping on your own, and I've provided the link here, and our host will also copy it and put it in the chat, so you can click on it yourself. But this will be available on our website through the end of July. So feel free to share it with anybody who's not at the meeting tonight too. Or if you have ideas tomorrow morning when you wake up and have had a chance to sleep on it, you can still provide feedback through the map. So with that, this is my contact information. This is the link to the project website where you can find the survey. We will post a video of the presentation there tomorrow or the next day. And we will also, this is where you can find the interactive map that you can put comments on. So thank you again for sharing your evenings with us. And the host is now going to send us all into discussion rooms.